Hello, entrepreneurs. Chapter 13 deals with the business buyout. The aim of this chapter is to explore the whole process of buying a business. Really, this is another option for entrepreneurs who do not want to start a business from scratch. So you can have the option of going through the business market and look at various businesses that are up for sale. So in this particular chapter, we will be evaluating the option of buying an existing business, finding a business to buy, what kind of a business you would be looking for. Of course, you need to take into consideration your skills and abilities, evaluating available businesses. You cannot just buy a business, but you have to find out first if it's worth the amount that they are asking for. Methods for determining the value of a business. You want to know, how am I going to define or determine whether the value that is being given to me for this particular business is actually worth it. So there are various methods for doing this. So we will be touching on those. And then the negotiating. When you sit down on the table and negotiate the price of the business, what's the process? What is the process that you need to follow? But then again, there are traps that you need to avoid when you buy an existing business. Some businesses are sold under the pretense that they are making profit, whereas they are not. So when you look at the outcomes, really, I'm just going through the summary of the various things that you need to understand when you are buying a business. Obviously, there are advantages for buying an existing business, because generally when you start your own business, you have to experience a lot of hardships and challenges, and it's too risky. You don't even know whether it's going to succeed or not. So fortunately, when there is a business that has already been established, there is a high possibility that it will continue to flourish if it was successful. And in most cases, some people want an immediate cash flow. It's easier and also quicker to buy a business rather than starting from scratch. And you have a possibility that you can buy this particular business at a bargain price when someone is giving it away. I've seen that when people are moving into other countries as well. They sell their businesses when they are in a hurry. You actually get a very low price to purchase that particular business. So other things that you need to actually look at, that the customers are already established, probably location is excellent, and you have experienced employees, you have established suppliers, you already have the trade agreements in place with various suppliers, and you might be even having inventory in that particular business that you can utilize, especially if you are probably in a manufacturing business. The equipment is well known and you have got people who can take care of it, so you know the production capacity of that particular business. Now, the other side of the coin is that you also might have disadvantages when you buy a business. The business might be running at a loss, but some accountants have very creative ways of showing that they are making profit, even if they are not necessarily making a profit. So when you might be having inadequate sales volumes, and if the business has got poor reputation, you are about to inherit that as well. So if there is a lot of internal conflict and unsuitable employees, in some companies you find that the employees are too old or too young, there is just no proper culture, and the business might be located in a very bad place. It might be a brilliant idea, but you don't have enough traffic in terms of people coming into the business. And the other thing is that if you have obsolete equipment, you will find it very difficult to find replacement for parts So if the equipment that is being used by that particular business is too old, you will run into that kind of challenge. Some businesses are overpriced. They are not really worth the amount of money that the sellers are asking. They are overpriced solely for the purpose that the purchaser or the buyer wants to make sure that the purchaser pays a lot of money so that they can get the most out of the business deal. Now, again, the last thing would be operating in the shadow of the previous owner. This could actually be quite a daunting task, especially if the previous owner was generous, kind, or the community took advantage of him, or sometimes you cannot keep up with that kind of environment if you are not interested in being a people's person or a social entrepreneur. So those are the things that you need to take into consideration. So a quick self-audit also help to identify the type of business that you'll be happy with. So the questions that you need to ask yourself in terms of buying a business are very important. For instance, what are the key business activities? Why do you want to buy that particular business? How much time, energy you want to put in? What are the risks involved in this business? The size also matters. Is it too big for you, for your skills and experience? All these are the kind of things that you need to take into consideration before you buy the business. So most businesses are actually put on the market and they are sold via business brokers, or you can even find them in property or newspapers. You would find someone trying to sell the business on their own. And the most common reason for selling businesses sometimes it's because of financial problems. You need to know about such things as well. Now, some businesses are not on the market. You have to actually go to specific people like property agents, business brokers, financial institutions, accountants and auditors, suppliers, friends or relatives to actually find out that the business is for sale. Now, the key thing about businesses is that you need to evaluate the worth of that particular business. Evaluation is one of the key important things, but we are not going to dwell on evaluation because this is a third-year activity where we literally ask you to go out and find a business and evaluate it. But when a business is for sale, it's important to establish why is it for sale. We don't accept things at face value. We find out secretly as well from the staff how is the business operating and how is it doing and what are the challenges that they are experiencing. And you just want to make sure that the accounting or the bookkeeping is properly done, and you need to understand the competitors that that particular business has, because if it's not competitive and it's actually failing to compete against other businesses around, it might be the reason why they decide to sell the business. So there are other aspects as well, like the lease agreements in place, all the kind of customers that they are having, the authority they have the correct licenses for that particular business. So these are the things that we need to take into consideration when we evaluate a business. The profitability is quite an important issue, if it's profitable or not, because you just need to know before you even embark on that particular business. If it's not profitable, how are you going to turn it around and make sure that it is a success? The other important key thing that you need to have is the key skills and competences that you are needed for managing that particular business. So make sure that before you take on a business, you either have people who have the skills and the expertise of running that particular business, because it doesn't matter how much profit it makes. If you do not have the right people to run the business, it's gonna be in vain and it won't make the cut. Now, there are quite a number of methods that are used for determining the value of a business. In most cases, some people are going to look into the assets-based methods, where you review the balance sheet of the business and it gives you an idea in terms of the fixed assets and the current assets of that particular business, of how much is the business worth. Some businesses are valued high because of the reputation and the prestige that they carry. So in as much as you would have on paper that the business is worth so much, but when you look at the goodwill issues, those are the things that make it even more expensive. The other method could be market-based methods, where you rely on financial markets to estimate the value of the business. So other businesses of similar kind, or who are providing more or less the same thing, how much do they cost out there? You find that that's how they would be in a position to determine the price of that particular business. So you can go through all that as well in detail in your textbook. And then some people would look at the earnings-based methods, where one buys a business because they are looking at the future income, the potential to earn. I've seen this happening, especially in most of the internet kind of businesses, where you are selling a concept or an idea and you're saying this has a potential to earn so much. So it's not as if that's how much that particular business is worth, but you are just taking into consideration the potential that that particular business has. So the detail in terms of the evaluation methods of determining the value of the business, you can just go through them. And again, I cannot emphasize this enough, you will do this in detail in your third year. Now, there is what we call the negotiating process. The final purchase price of the business is determined through negotiation between the buyer and the seller. So it's quite important that the calculated price that the seller arrived at by implementing one of the mentioned methods may not be the price eventually to be paid for the business, but you can sit down and have some kind of negotiation, whether to ask maybe the seller to decrease the price on the basis of certain factors. So the negotiation is quite an interesting part. I can make a lot of examples, but unfortunately, because we are not necessarily face to face, I would rather just give you a few key things that a negotiation process will include. The business for sale must be identified and approached, and the buyer and seller each do a preliminary research about the credentials of the part. Like I've mentioned before, you can actually get to ask a few questions around the employees so that you can get the gist of what the business is really capable of producing in terms of sales volume and its profitability. So the process is quite important. So if you go through the various steps in the negotiation process, you are going to find out the key things that you may be in a position to do during the negotiation process. there is another aspect in terms of the negotiation process where we discuss the difference between price and a value of something. The value of a business is set in the market and is what someone is willing to pay for. I know that a lot of people confuse value and price, but it's not the same. So the value is ultimately set by the buyer. The seller determines a price for the business by using a computational method. For instance, if you take into consideration all the costs, all the activities that have gone into the establishment of the business, and then you say, but I've spent so much on this and spent so much on this, you are trying to come up with a price based on all the activities that you actually had to go through to establish the business. So I hope this gives you an idea in terms of the difference between what is the price versus the value. When the buyer agrees that the business is worth as much as the asking price, the sale would be made, obviously. Setting the price for the business does not make the business worth that amount. Price and value are therefore two totally different things. So now, there are various factors that would contribute to the difference between the price and the value. The determined price does not reflect the full potential of the business. You could sell a business at a certain price only to find that later on the business now is worth even more than what it was sold for. There are so many factors that may influence that. So I also need you to go through all those factors, and now we look into what are the sources of power in terms of negotiations, because when you come into the negotiation table, you must make sure that you have enough information about the real value of the business, information about incomplete and unreliable information in terms of the accounting records may lead to a disadvantage for you. The worst possible mistake is to rely only on the seller for the information. So you have to go out and do your own digging. Timing is everything. If you are the only buyer, for instance, and there is no one who is competing with you in terms of buying the business, there is a possibility that you can negotiate a favorable price for this particular business. And some people are under pressure because they cannot come up with certain amounts to cover certain costs. So the negotiation process also is influenced by that from both sides, seller and the buyer. Seller may be influenced that there are many other people who want the business. The buyer may be influenced because they might experience closed shop or liquidation. So they will be in a position to negotiate a lower price if it happens that they don't have many people who wants to buy their business. Now, there are so many other traps that we need to avoid when we buy an existing business. I will not discuss them in detail, but you are going to find these key things on your book, Legal Circumference, unknown territory, attraction to status and size. A lot of people believe that high attorney fees, their advisors should and will pay enough attention to the details on the transaction. You need legal assistance when you buy, especially a business, because there are so many things that you will not be in a position to understand. But I also believe that you also have the responsibility to read the terms and conditions, to read through the fine print about that particular business, because at the end of the day, you are going to be the one who face the music if anything goes wrong. Now, in reference to the unknown territory, to enter an unknown terrain is another trap. If you don't know much about that particular business, most businesses have got rules and regulations and ethical procedures to follow. They have licenses that you need to have. There are just so many other things that you may not know that are required to run that particular business. So it's always a good idea to find out if you are complying with a lot of things that are required for you to actually, especially when you are manufacturing or when you are selling liquor, there are just so many other things that you need to understand about the business. Now, some people go and be attracted by larger businesses, but the question is, do you have the skill and do you have the abilities to actually run those bigger organizations? Because larger businesses require a lot of time and energy and also expertise and experience. So you have to take those things into consideration. And then we also have other things like opportunity costs that you need to take into consideration, greed, underestimation of other costs, being too anxious and impatient. All these are the traps that you need to avoid. I hope this summarizes the chapter for you, and you'll be in a position to ask more questions should you find some things a bit difficult.